Just like that, and here's the music.
WV Uncommon Place. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate theories to get to know the hosts, along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episode. The Uncommon Place digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to our Uncommon Place.
Greetings, everybody. Now, this is what happens to me. When Stacy and I get in our vehicle and we're leaving West Virginia, we get on Interstate 77, and depending on where we're going, we can end up going all the way down to Charlotte, and Charlotte will hang a left. Or if we're heading somewhere else, Tennessee, or maybe the great state of Georgia, we'll cut through Tennessee and drop down through Forsyth County or somewhere to get to Atlanta. And we travel all over the place. And when you get to talk to people and you get to know a little bit about every area in the East Coast or in the SEC, like people like to talk about, people act different, do things different. But one thing that always happens is advocacy. Advocacy goes on in education, healthcare, and in public service. And when you meet somebody, you hear about someone, or someone brings themselves into your ecosystem and they allow you to know who they are and those things that I just spoke about they do, then you meet amazing people like Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, out of respect, she does have a first name, Nelva, correct?
Correct.
But she's Dr. Lee, so we're going to respect her throughout this episode. We're going to respect her anytime. But what I'm saying here is right now, I'm going to pass the floor on to you. And the most nostalgic question that goes on this show is, who are you and why are you here? But we're not going to do that today. I need something from you, and this is very inspirational and aspiring at the same time. I need to know something that one of your grandparents taught you, a lesson or a parable or something that your grandparents taught you. And I'll explain later on in the episode why this matters.
My grandmother, we called her Girly. Her name was Lastinia. She was one of like 15 children born in Costa Rica in poverty. And back in the day when you couldn't feed your children, you kind of farmed them out to family members. So she ended up in Panama. And from a very young age, had to leave school and ended up really putting herself, fending for herself very early on by cooking. She was an amazing cook. And I learned just a valuable lesson from her about just a joy of life. She was always very grateful for everything that she had, and just having just the spirit of gratitude always. And that was what embodied my grandmother. And I just learned the value of hard work from her as well. She had a very, very strong work ethic. But more than anything, I remember just how much she loved to plant and how much she just enjoyed it and just gave God thanks for everything that she had.
Okay, now the distinction that we can do there is you learned a work ethic from your grandmother, correct?
Correct.
And
yeah.
Notice the smile on your face got bigger when you started realizing that, hey, my grandmother was the intricate web that started my story. Isn't that amazing? Like when you really go back and think about the most elementary part of what started you on your journey. Now, let's talk about your journey now. Tell us about your upbringing and tell us about where you're native from and you coming to America.
So I mentioned that I'm from Panama, right? Like my grandmother ended up in Panama, and that's on my grandmother on my paternal side, but my grandparents on my maternal side are from Jamaica. So okay. I have a bit of a West Indies in there, but they all came really because of the Panama Canal, right? To help build the canal. And unfortunately, in the late 80s, we had a dictator there by the name of Noriega, if you remember that.
Yes. Oh, Noriega, yes.
Yes. And so I was there as a teenager when he took over. Yes. And it was a very, very traumatic experience. People were going in exile, people were disappearing, presumed dead. And I remember right down the street from where we lived, there was a general, a very high-ranking general in Noriega's, army. And I remember my dad sitting us down and was like, "You guys, he's no longer," because he had a son about our age. My dad told us, for me and my brothers, "He's no longer your friend," because Noriega was really attacking anyone that worked for the canal. My dad worked for the canal. So I can tell you, when I came to the States as a teenager, I had a very keen appreciation for the freedoms that we have here in the US. Coming from a dictatorship to a democracy, it was a stark contrast. And I have never forgotten that, like you said, the ethos of advocacy because of it. You have to use your voice, you have to use your vote. And I know many people take that for granted and they hear that and say, "Oh, yeah, in America, we have these freedoms." But really and truly, when you come from a country that does not have them, you appreciate them so much more. And I believe that's one of the reasons why I have always been very, very involved in politics in some way or another, right? Because I believe that we have a duty to help those that don't have a voice or help those that are marginalized by society.
Hey, and I like that. Now, one thing I want to throw in here real quick is education, healthcare, entrepreneurship, public
Yes,
service. Those all tie in together. But let's do the education. I
sure.
need I need the education you started out with, and then the education we can compare and contrast it to the one that you got as a high schooler in the United States, correct? Or were you
Correct.
already?
Yes, I moved here I started high school, correct. And I had made a decision very early on, JR, that I wanted to be one of the first in my family to obtain a college degree. My parents didn't have college degrees, and very few people in my family did. And I just knew that that was the way for me forward. But there was no way for me to pay for that. And so the summer between my 11th grade and 12th grade, I obtained a trade certification in healthcare because I knew I wanted to go into healthcare. And it was really one of the smartest things I ever did because not only was I able to work my way through college, pay my way through college, but as soon as I finished my bachelor's, I was able to get a really good job because I had experience in the industry. And so one of the things that one of my signature initiatives as a candidate for superintendent of schools is just that, is to be able to offer trade certifications to all graduates, right? So they graduate with high school diploma and a trade certification. But just kind of fast forwarding a little bit further, I was able to work as a healthcare administrator. I got my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in healthcare administration.
Whoa.
I did, and really just realizing in one of my departments when I was a director at Great Health System, just realizing that there was a need for vocational school for interpreters, medical interpreters specifically. I started my own vocational school. So I'd had the curriculum training because I'd worked as an adjunct professor for many years. And so I took those skill sets and applied it to this vocational school. And it was a really one of a kind because it was an online school. And we were able to service students from across the nation because of it. And I saw so many people just earn pride and purpose because of that certification that they had obtained. And just my involvement in the industry, I was able to be very integral in the creation of the certification exam after that. And now with the whole advent of AI and the connection with human interpreting, I'm also at the forefront of that as well.
Right, and that's amazing because I think about this, and my wife Stacy, she watches a dramatized show which is Grey's Anatomy, and I know that
All
doesn't have,
right. Yes.
but it has a lot of different nationalities in it, and that's what sparked my interest. Finding a medical interpreting trade school to actually help people bridge the gap between language,
Correct.
and then like how did you personally in your life see these gaps and see these deficits that were there,
Hmm.
and how does it feel to know that you've improved this across the nation, and in some ways we never get the true part of what the international take is on everything.
Mhm.
But you know that it's reached international. Like what
Correct.
was it? What was it that really drove you to want to do this? Because everybody has what I call a downfall story. But with
Mhm.
something like this, it could have been like something like an adversity maybe. So what
Right.
was it that made you want to do this out of everything that you could have done with yourself?
So as I mentioned, I was a director of patient advocacy at the Grady Health System at the time. And one of the programs in my department was interpreting services. And so we were tasked with qualifying all of our interpreters, making sure that they were trained and all their languages were qualified, making sure that they were fluent in the languages that they claimed that they spoke. Well, it was very difficult to find a training program in the state of Georgia at the time. And this was back in the early 2000s. And so for me, whenever I see that there's a gap, I try to fill it. That's just my makeup. So I said, I went initially to the CEO of Grady and I said, why don't we start our own training program? And he passed on that opportunity. And I thought, well, why don't I start my own? And like I said, I had already been working as a adjunct professor for healthcare administration, and I had been trained by these top universities in curriculum development. So I knew I had the skill set to do it. So it didn't come out from left field. So I saw the need, I had the skill sets to do it, and so I did it.
Right. And I like that because that shows, and that right there, I like that because entrepreneurs that are listening to the episode or watching the video of this, I want to teach you something real quick. That's a person that saw an issue and created two things at one time, a reason and a why to do it. And the reason and why, when you're an entrepreneur, that's why you become an entrepreneur. That because you saw a door, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. Someone passed on you, so they closed the door. They gave you a no. You took that no, and you said, "Oh, my new opportunity."
Correct.
So I
Yes.
love that philosophy there. And then going from that, Georgia's in your veins. The Department of Community Health, you were appointed to that by the Governor Kemp. Now, what
Correct.
did experience teach you about, policy decisions and how they impact real people on the ground? Because the thing that I loved about y'all state, I have been to maybe not every single county, but I've gone north, south, and eastern part of Georgia. So
Okay.
I see that, even though I'm from Virginia originally, in West Virginia, I can tell, like, Georgia has the northern part is like West Virginia, the southern part you can Florida, Alabama, whatever you want to call it, but
Right.
the middle of Georgia is transplant city. You don't know what you're going to get, where you're going to go. Anything
You're
below
right.
Atlanta or around Atlanta, basically, because you could be in
The
Atlanta, go to
perimeter. Yes.
yeah, and you could go to Alpharetta. Next thing you know, it'll be whatever. So, how did these policy decisions, and you seeing this happen in real life with people, how did that affect you? And then how did that go into, you getting more in depth with with higher education and public service?
Got it. So as I mentioned, I've always had public service in my veins. Ever since I moved to the US, I just was always very in tune or attuned to politics and policy, right? And so I always knew that I would eventually run for office. And I've been really involved in kind of like the peripheral, joining the, Black Republicans, the Georgia Black Republicans Council, and being a member of various, boards, community service, mostly nonprofits, okay, nonprofit boards. But this opportunity came about because of my involvement with the Georgia Black Republicans and just having that connection. And so I made the pitch basically that I wanted to be appointed to a board in healthcare. And because of my experience, my over 30 years of experience in healthcare administration, I was presented with this opportunity. Really being on this board was an eye opener because of just it taught you, it taught me specifically just kind of the ins and outs of policymaking, right? And how very slow the process can be compared to being on the board of a nonprofit or even running my own business, right? It's very easy to make a decision and tomorrow it's implemented when you're the CEO.
Right.
Not so when you are in a government agency. You have to give opportunity for the community to respond. That comes back 2-3 months later, and you're revising your policy based on that. And then it goes back to the community for their feedback on the revisions. And so it's a very lengthy process. And also, it opened up my eyes as to how little engagement you get really from the community on certain issues. You would think that the Department of Community Health would have had a lot of engagement, especially in the aftermath of COVID. This was during very close to the when COVID was front and center, right? And yet we didn't have that much engagement. Maybe a few hundred people, but this is a state of millions, and so I was expecting a lot more engagement from the public, and so that was just an eye opener as well.
And I can understand that because I can even tell you, just being from living in West Virginia, there's only 1.5 million of us there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the equivalency of Atlanta. We can just both agree on that. That actually isn't an equivalency of Atlanta. It's the northern part of Atlanta.
Correct.
And the thing is that knowledge on healthcare and even the simple parts of policy of we could talk about HIV or anything like that. It's crazy like that. I've met people that are 35, 36 years old that don't even know what a free clinic is or don't
Yeah.
those things. So that's another thing that drawed me in with this. But now I want to get to a topic that I really am in love with.
Okay.
You running for the Georgia Superintendent of Schools. What motivated you to enter the race, and how did this experience shape your understanding of leadership and education reform? And the reason I put that in there in the education reform is because I've noticed in my lifetime, I'm 40 years old as of July,
Okay.
and literacy across everything from the Mason-Dixon line, which runs through West. I know I keep tying things in West Virginia, but basically everything from Virginia below. There's a difference in the education, and I'm not going to say race, but I want to say black and white. There's a difference between the northern and the southern people when it comes to literacy and our actual, and this is really weird what I'm about to say, the actual concept of comprehension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I can go east to west from where I live, and I can tell you that I have noticed that even my little small town in Virginia, the way that education was executed and the way we did things, it's actually on a state level, not even on a federal level. It's how the state treats and meets and greets its people at their front door. That's where the true education reform needs to come from. So you running for this inside your state, what motivated you to do this, and what understanding are you going to take from this, as far as leadership?
Right. So, as I mentioned, when I see something broken, I have to find a solution. That's just my makeup. And I do believe that our educational system in the state of Georgia is broken. We are 38th out of 50 in the nation.
Whoa.
Yes, we were surpassed by Mississippi. Okay.
Whoa. Mississippi. Go.
Yes. Yeah, they went from 50th. Mississippi went from 50th. Now they're in the top 10. And they did that by going back to the basics when it came to phonics, back to the basics when it came to arithmetic. And we need to do the same here in the state of Georgia. But I'll tell you, specifically for literacy, what you're pointing out, we need to make sure that we are teaching them at the earliest levels and holding the teachers to the fire as far as getting those results. Because I'll tell you, I spoke to a preschool teacher not too long ago. And I said, what are your goals for students to get out, when they're getting out of preschool? And she said, as long as they know some letters, that's all, that's the requirement. And I said, what's some letters? And she said, she couldn't tell me what that meant. Is that 2 letters? Is that 3? So there was no clear guidelines, even from the teachers, on what they're supposed to teach students. I can tell you that as a superintendent of schools, I'm going to change that. We have to prioritize literacy, because by the 3rd grade, they're building prisons based on whether or not children are literate. Okay, so under my superintendency, no child will leave 2nd grade without learning how to read. And if they do, we're going to have them repeat, and we're going to throw resources at them and make sure that we have the best resources for those children that need to learn a different way. So here's 2 of my initiatives. Okay. Definitely prioritizing leadership, but also I want to see an expansion in school choice. All right, because I want parents to be empowered to take their children and put them in an educational environment that best matches them. I was a homeschool mother. I was my children, my youngest, who we adopted from the foster care system, had some learning gaps, and we pulled her out of the public school system and put her in a Montessori-like system,
Yes, yes.
which she thrived under. So it shouldn't just be my children or children of those with means that have those opportunities. And that's why we need to have a true school choice here in the state of Georgia. I like to expand on the Promise Scholarship Act. And then the second initiative that I have is that of trade school. So I mentioned that myself going through trade school when I was a high schooler, having a trade, being the CEO of a trade school. I do believe that trade schools are, in fact, beneficial to all students. And so I would like to see all Georgia graduates graduate not only with a high school diploma, but also with a trade school certification.
And I love that because that makes sense. Because I can tell you this, and this is from my personal story. I went through school, whatever, went to college, and then I went and got a trade after I left college.
Wow.
And the trade was as a CNA. And
That's
you would
awesome.
think that I would have done it in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, and this is a little secret that I don't like to put out there. I've made more money off of the trade school than the actual degree I went to college for at that time. Later on, it caught up because
Right.
I was putting in proper placement. But I'll tell you the one thing that I hope that you can get improved in the schools is we need to go back to the basics, like you said, but we need home economics. We need to know. I knew how to balance a checkbook in the 4th grade.
Exactly.
And then the other thing that I would like to ask you about is this, in your opinion on this, just because we're just talking about the superintendent portion right now. What do you think of the blending of special needs kids into regular classes? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
here's my emphasis. My son Landon is autistic.
Okay.
He has PPD and OS, which is classified as something else now, but they change the classification every so often. So he did not have a disruptive form of autism. He just needed time. He needed pull out, like to go out the classroom to learn a certain way. And by the time, because we work with them with ABA therapy and stuff to make sure that there wasn't a behavioral issue in the classroom that established ahead of time. I do think that every kid should be tested for autism and whatever behavioral system that you all use to check that. Behavioral is something that needs to be checked at the front door. Not kindergarten, not in preschool, but in kindergarten, there should be a way we can stop the kids from being a distraction and getting them the help they need. That's something that I've not seen implemented anywhere. I know that there's IEPs and all that other stuff that you can get done, but the behavioral portion. Now, with Landon, for instance, by the time he got to 8th grade, he was ready to go into, what we call normal classes or the functional
Right.
classes. And he's thrived ever since. And when he's needed help, he has an IEP to get the help he needs in certain areas, and he functions and moves around like anyone else. So, what do you want to happen with the special needs children? Like, how do you want them to be implemented into the classroom? Because what I see in my state, and I've seen in a lot of other places, now they're just integrated into the classroom, and they're a disturbance, which I'm not calling them a disturbance, but they are interrupting the learning process. And I don't know how that is in Georgia, so I'm asking a question of, does that go on down there? But I think that, we don't have to separate those kids, but those kids, when they need extra help or cause a disturbance, we need to have a resource to help them, not pacify them with an iPad.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I have 2 children that needed a little extra help. My oldest, he also was autistic, genius, so academically very advanced, but socially and developmentally not so much. And so I homeschooled him through the 5th grade. So allow him to advance academically at his pace and also to catch up, socially. And that really worked for him. For my daughter, she had ADHD and dyslexia. So as I mentioned, for her, the solution was put her in a Montessori environment. And here's the beauty, is that every child can learn, but they need to have a learning environment that matches their specific learning needs.
Yes.
So yes, you have average kids that do just fine in the public school system as it is. But you have other kids that are either very bright or very, have, as you mentioned, ADHD or some other type of, potentially, behavior issues, but they don't present themselves if they're in the right environment. And that is what I would like to see, is more options for parents for learning environments that best match their child's needs. And so I'd like to see more public Montessori's. All right, other states have them. I would like to see more of that here in the state of Georgia. Maybe some public KIPP courses, right? KIPP type schools.
Yes, okay, I could go with that.
There's so many different types of learning environments that we can pick and choose if we give them more options, if we give parents more options. And so that is really what I'd like to see. So as far as the IEP is concerned, so my true belief is that we have, in some ways, abused that system, right? Because states get more funding if they label someone an IEP, and when it comes to testing, schools don't have to count these children with IEPs test scores along with everyone else. So it actually skews the test scores for the schools. It does. And so that's one of the reasons. So children that have a true diagnosis, yes. But I believe that a lot of children, especially with ADHD, autism, etc., could simply do better if they had different learning environments. And we wouldn't have to go through the whole rigmarole of having them have different classrooms and being taken out and being, labeled.
Well, I need you to repeat this one more time for the audience and for me, because I'm shell shocked about this. So a kid with an IEP does not count against your test.
That their test results do not get mixed with a regular.
Oh, all right, so they don't count.
They don't count.
So
right?
they don't count towards the regular. So
Correct.
basically, every enhancement that you give that student, you don't show an improvement.
It doesn't matter. And
So
that's why I'm very leery of every child being put on an IEP, because are they being put on there simply so that the school doesn't have to really work with them and get them up to standards? Because hey, that child is an IEP, they don't count. And also I'm concerned as to what that labeling does to that child, because we know that there's studies that have been done where teachers teach children with quote unquote learning disabilities differently than they do children that they believe can learn. There was a famous study done of teachers that were told that these were advanced students, but they were told that these children had learning disabilities. And the children, after I believe it was like 2 or 3 months, actually scored lower because the teachers just had a bias against them, saying, hey, they're not going to learn. Whereas the students that did have learning difficulties were told that the teachers were told that they were advanced. And so when they weren't learning as quickly, the teachers just thought that it was themselves, not the students. And so they worked harder to get the children to learn. And therefore, these students ended up with test scores that were higher. So this implicit bias that teachers have if someone is labeled is also a concern to me. Therefore, I'm very leery of just putting every child on an IEP. Very leery.
And I love that. And that's going to be a gem inside this episode, because I deal with teachers and I have a teacher in my family. And I noticed one thing too, that the enthusiasm that a teacher's aide, and how they treat certain kids inside the classroom dictates and motivates how they learn, like you just said, and everything you put there. And the motivation, if they don't get it, and a teacher's not going to ever be negative, but I've heard off-putting comments, and you can see mannerisms from them. I really didn't pay much attention until I got involved with someone I know in their child and learning a little bit more about this. But that is, like you said, that all puts a child, and if you teach that in kindergarten or preschool, it follows them through. And that's the one thing that scares me about the COVID generation of kids that had to learn on an iPad, because they have a lack of motivation. they don't have a desired drive that we all were given. We were told,
They
hey,
were isolated for so many years, or such a huge chunk of their education. Yeah.
and that's why I think, and you know it better than me, there's huge deficits in reading because
Yes.
those kids are our 6th and 7th graders now, and the test scores.
Yes, they did. And obviously we also have to deal with the mental health component of that. Because of the isolation, there's higher instances of anxiety and depression, which also affects learning. And so we are definitely dealing with all that as an aftermath of COVID.
Right, and another thing I noticed, and I know that everybody was built with it. Maybe I come from a different breed, but I noticed that self-esteem is something that is not addressed in school.
Mm,
We're taught to not bully somebody. I get all that, but like actually learning that self-love, the word self, we're taught everything in a group, and the mentality of the children, it seems to me, is like we have to learn in a group. Sometimes we have a leader, sometimes we don't. But I think you now tying that all up and getting back to you. Thank you for the little part there because I really needed that. Mental wellness, culture, and education, they're critical. Like, and
yes.
we talked about that a lot. What conversations have you had to have personally? And this is not on my
Mhm.
docket. What kind of conversations have you had to have personally with yourself to say sometimes, and as you being an educator in working administration, you know how to have empathy and sympathy and pull yourself from it and be the voice of reason. But how do you sit there and know that across the whole age demographic, you're touching, you're dipping and dabbing, but you're having to do it on a full scale? You're looking at every portion control when you're doing this also on how to curate a way for someone to learn. What type
Mm,
of pressure is that on you? When you have to think this and I'm gonna just call it a manifesto so it sounds funny and it sounds serious at the same time. You have to make a manifesto basically of how basically the architect actually of how we learn, how we comprehend, how we understand, how a person deciphers them. We'll use all the levels of understanding, I hope.
mhm.
You have to curate a way for them to have most of the entry levels of understanding, and then the other levels, and then you have to give them a genius level by the time they get to high school, and then offer the option that makes sense too. And I love that about your whole policy and everything you're doing. That trade school will help them because not everybody wants to go to college, and not everybody's going to be in the mindset that they're going to do everything to go to college. We need people in the workforce, and I'm glad that you give them both that option, but you let them know that hey, you're going to get a trade because if you have that trade and you need something to fall back on, you're doing the best thing in the world for us because obviously we've lost Job Corps to a certain degree. You're taking that emphasis from Job Corps, and I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm saying you've seen it out there, and you're
Mhm.
going to give it to them early so that they know that they have a purpose, a place. And the key thing in everything that you've said in this interview is you want these children to have meaning because they're going to get acceptance regardless because you'll have a nice policy for that, but you're trying to make sure that they have meaning when they walk across that stage or
Yes.
when they leave the public school sector or whatever form of school sector, which obviously you're in the public school, and I
Mhm.
appreciate that. So last thing before we get up out of here is this right here. What is your mission statement for the next 3 years? Now,
Okay.
the way I want you to break it down for me is give me year one, year two, and year three. So that's 3 mission statements. The floor is yours, doctor.
So I don't really look at it that way.
Okay,
I'm
well,
gonna I'm gonna just kind of back up just a little bit. I see it as leadership, right? So I believe a good leader has to have a vision, but I also believe very much in empowering my team. And so right now, I don't believe that the school system of Georgia is getting good leadership, right? Uh, we're not engaging our superintendents, we're not engaging our principals, we're certainly not engaging our parents, right? So I want to see as a leader, I believe every time I'm in any leadership position, JR, my role is to empower those to do their jobs at the highest level. That is really my goal. And yes, to point them to a goal that I would like to see. So My ultimate goal, as I mentioned, is to improve literacy, is to improve our overall rates, Georgia school rankings. We need to be lifted out of the 30s. Okay, I'd like to see us back in the top 10. But really and truly having a broad range, a broad enough vision that everyone can rally behind, but then empowering my individual leaders under me to do the best job. Because so many times what's happening is if you're not providing leadership, either people fall asleep at the wheel, okay, or they feel as though their efforts aren't being appreciated. And so you have to be able to have an environment where everybody's best work is appreciated and noticed and applauded. And so that's really how I see leadership. I don't see it as everything's on my shoulder to do everything, because that's a false it's a false sense of what a leader is, right? If you believe that everything falls on you, you're not going to get anything done, because good leaders really are great because they motivate others to do the best. And so I do believe that it starts with literacy, though. At the end of the day, if our children are able to read at the earliest level, they're going to succeed throughout. And then if we are catching them right before they finish high school and giving them true purpose and true meaning with a great career, then they'll really, we're launching them into the world prepared. And I don't believe that a trade school is just for those that are not college bound. Because if you're college bound, you are also going to benefit from trade school. Just as I mentioned myself, I benefited from having a trade school certification in high school. And even though I was college bound. So everyone can benefit. That's why I want it universal. Everyone gets a trade school certification and their high school diploma before leaving a Georgia high school.
And I like your twist on that, because my sentiment is just, I'm that old school that you don't want to go to college, go to trade school. But you are right, because when those people are in college and you have a trade, you got something that can back you if you need financial help, and it's a confidence booster. Because when you
Correct.
stage and you got
it acts as an internship. So if you're getting a trade certification in the industry that you're planning on going into, whether it's a paralegal for a lawyer or a coding certificate for those that are going into tech, or if you're going into any in healthcare type of, there's tons of healthcare certifications that you can get. So there's tons of things that you can do, certifications that you can get that will complement your college degree, right? And that is what I like. That is why I believe everyone will benefit from this.
All right. And I want to thank you, Dr. Lee, for coming on the show. And real quick, I want to give you a quick testament about yourself, because we sat here, we've talked, and I've learned a lot, and I've become well versed and educated from what you've told me to this evening. It's 7:40 where I'm at, and I don't ever tell a date or time because I don't want to something crazy to happen,
Got it.
might disappear. Now, here's the thing. You come from another country and you come to the United States, and when you came here, you saw the opportunity. You saw what the difference was where you were from and where you were at. And
Right.
through an amazing belief and a great morale, you were able to know that your future was starting.
Yeah.
The minute you decided to advocate, the moment you decided when someone told you no, it was entrepreneurship. When it came a point when even dealing in your own life, that mental wellness meant something to you. Through the education you got, you learned about culture. Through being in two different places, the culture once again. Being in the great state of Georgia, and we're not talking about the football, we're talking about just the whole state. Being there and seeing the cracks, seeing the rawness of what goes on, north, south, east, west, wherever it's at. You saw more than anyone else will ever know or will ever truly hear about, but you saw something was broken. The education system. And you are a fixer up, we like to say, up north in the South.
Yeah.
And since you're the person that can construct, and you said leading, you lead by example, but you lead in a way like this. When you step out in front and you're leading an exercise, You have people to the left and right of you. You have nobody behind you and nobody in front of you. And you let them look left and right, behind their back and in front, just like you are. And that type of leadership is hard to come by because everybody has this emphasis that, oh, well, I'm the leader. Everybody else must grovel, or they are not beneath me, but they're not on the same platform. There's a plateau. In that plateau, you jump from it and go to a higher. And you don't believe in that. And that,
No, that's through trial and error. Trust me, I've been a leader for many years, and the best leaders are those that motivate those around them.
right. And your motivation and drive is what education needs now.
All right.
Every person I have met, and I'm telling you, I'm not just saying because I was born in 1985, but after 1989, or 1988, actually, 1988, after that year, I don't know what happened to motivation. I don't know why I left the education system, but please bring it back. So my testimony to you is look in the mirror tomorrow, fix your hair up and look at yourself and be happy. And when you give yourself the side eye because you're about to leave out the mirror, remember one thing, you're impacting and you're impactful, and that is more than anyone did the day before or will do the day after. And I know you're like me and you're probably like my wife, your past is a ponytail and it's behind you, but know that the lasting effect of education and what you do, you are the growth, you are the water on top of a seed.
Exactly. That is so true.
So on that note, she is Dr. Nelva Lee, and I am JR Sparrow, the host of West Virginia and Commonplace, and Stacy's on assignment. Her and I are going to say goodbye, but one thing I want to do real quick, Dr. Lee, please give the flowers to the people that need to know that there are flowers coming from you, please.
For sure. I love how you said that. I mean, that we are so integral in planting seeds and in watering those seeds. And that is anything that you do for children lasts a lifetime. If your listeners would like to hear more or learn more about me, and I have several books on my website, they can check them out at drnelvalee.com.
Okay. So on that note, we're out of here, and I'm about to play that outro.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at onecommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening, and tune into the next episode.